This is a tutorial on keyframes in scripting with bpy, scripting language for Blender. And I'm just going to show you quickly some walk through the basic concept of how keyframes work here. So a keyframe is going to set animation points, and then Blender is going to interpolate between those keyframe animation points. So what it lets us do is say, if my cube is here at time 0 and my cube is here at time 10, Blender, you figure out how to get me from point A to B. I'm just going to tell you some key frames that I care about and what that should look like, and then you can interpolate the rest. So keyframes, as opposed to processing, where we were saying exactly what happens on every frame, keyframes are a different model of animation that lets us talk at a little bit of a higher level of abstraction about what we want to happen. So what we're going to do here is add some keyframes to control our cubes. So you can see this is our script from the last video where I introduced materials and scripting. So far what we've done is we've added a camera. We imported our Blender library, and we've deleted all the objects from the scene so that every time we run our code, we're starting with a blank slate. This is really important so that every time we run our code, we get the same result. So I've deleted all my objects, and then I add a camera back, and I've put this camera a little bit overhead over these cubes here. So you can kind of, I kind of got it flipped upside down now. There we go. There's my camera, and I've got a light point as well. See, that's my light point, and my light is behind the camera overhead, shining down on these little cubes that I placed. So here I added my light. I turned up the energy so that it would be a very bright light. And then I have a loop that creates the 10 cubes in a row right here. I have primitive cube add, and I use the loop variable to change the location, and I set the size. And then every time I add one of these cubes, I'm also adding a material. So the next thing I want to do now in this video is add some animation to my cubes. You can see again, we'll do the render image. And so the image that we're getting here is an overhead view of our cubes with this blue material. And just as a reminder, we set a green background color here by going over here and selecting world and then changing the background. And previously we also created this material 0.001, which you can see here. Let's just go here. This material, which I set to this kind of bluish color. So the materials and the background are going to persist across every run of my script, but the objects are all getting deleted and reset. So that's how we get our scene so far, and now I want these cubes to move. So to do this, I'm going to add keyframes to my cubes here, and I'm going to reference back the script that I had before, which is this one. And in this one, I am setting, where do I set my keyframes? Oh, here I have my keyframes. I'm doing keyframe insert. Do it for the camera too. Let's use this. This is kind of nice. I say, I'm looking at whatever object I am talking about here, and then I insert a keyframe, and I want to talk about the location and the frame. So let's just copy this so far, and I'll say for the, let's see if this works actually. For the object I was just looking at, I want to insert a keyframe at frame 1, and I'm going to set another keyframe at frame 20, and the location that's going to be used for this first keyframe set is the current location, which would be the initial location of our cube. And now what I need to do is change the location of that cube. So I'm going to say, take the object I've currently talking about, which is a cube, because that's the last thing I added. And we're going to change the location, and I want the X, Y. Maybe I'm going to change the Y location. And the Y location, if it was 1 before, it should be 2 now. And so when I set the insert a keyframe here, and I say insert a keyframe that talks about the location, and this is setting the location data at frame 20, then my location, my Y location that I set here, this is going to take effect at frame 20. That's what I'm saying. Schedule this in to your animation. So let's see if this actually works. We'll click render animation this time. Oh, and there we go. Our cubes are moving off the screen. Bye-bye cubes. And you can see we've gotten up to frames here. Now I didn't set a frame end, so this is just going to keep rendering more and more frames, which is fine. And if I go back and view my animation, we're going to see that animation. We're actually going to see some old animations I was working on because those were longer animations. You can fix this by clearing the file path. You can see this is the file path here of your animation, and I have animations that were hundreds of frames long, and so it said, oh well, I'm going to just go through this folder with all your images and show them to you one by one, and since I have those old frames in there still as well, it's showing me all of those animations. But here initially, when we go from frame 0 to frame 34, whenever I stopped that animation, we see our little cubes move up. So this is the basic idea. If I wanted to do more of these, I could say, let's move our cubes up, and then we're going to move our cubes back down. This time I'll make them go to -1, and that should be by frame 40. So at frame 1, they'll have the initial position. Frame 2, they'll have that position. At frame 40, they'll have this one. And while we're at it, why don't we just do something else? Maybe then I want the X positions to all change. Now notice when I'm changing the X position, so far I've just been changing the Y position, and the Y position of all these cubes is the same. If I say at frame 60, I want the X location to become, let's say, 1. What that means is that all of my cubes are going to change their X location to be 1. So let's actually watch this, because I think this is going to be a little bit clarifying when we see what happens here. Oh, but the only thing is it picks up that location as the last location. So after I say this, I'll set my locations back to I, loop variable that I had. So this is what I start with, and then I'm not inserting a keyframe here, so I think this will work. Render an animation. Let's see, so first, until I go to frame 20, I should see my cubes moving up. And then once it hits frame 20, now my cubes should be coming back down until frame 40. I should get to the 0 position, which is a little bit lower than we had before. And now they're all collapsing in together because I said their X position should all be set to 1. And there we go. That's the end of my little animation. Notice that these frames are still being recorded. So I'm just going to get some amount of time here where I'm just staring at a cube in my animation. You can change that with the keyframe end, but it's fine for now. Let's view this animation. And it's always, when you first view the animation, it's going to look a little choppy because the computer is loading the animation into memory. Don't worry about what that means too much, but it's a little choppy at first. Just let it run once and then you'll see a nice smooth animation. So we'll wait and go back to see that one more time. Oop, up and down and together. Nice. So that's the basic of keyframes. So what happened here is my location Y I set to 2. So I set a keyframe for my initial location that I had set. So this is where you're going to start. And then at frame 20, your Y position should be 2. At frame 40, your Y positions should be 0. By frame 60, your X position should be 1. So all of the cubes are changing their X position, and the cubes need to move differently to get that X position. You saw some moving from the left and some moving from the right. And then I had this one line here. This one's a little bit tricky. If I remove this, let me run this one more time. Notice in my scripting object here, all of my cubes are in the same position. So what's happened is I've set this X location, so my scene thinks, oh yeah, they should all be here. But I still want them to initially have this location that I was talking about, where their X location is I. It's just this one I'm only setting for the sake of the frame, so that's why I have to add this extra line in, just to repeat what I had set up here, so it knows where to start.